the General Practice Podcast from Ockham Healthcare, supporting innovation in general practice.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with Practice Index, and we talk about those dreaded CQC inspections. Now, there's no need to worry. Practice Index has everything you need to ensure you feel prepared and confident for your visit. From CQC Manager to the must-have CQC Handbook, they've got you covered. You can even boost your team's knowledge with the CQC for All Staff e-learning course and the 6-module CQC Masterclass in the Practice Index Hub. Head to practiceindex.co.uk to find out more. Well, I'm joined today by Claire Houston from Practice Index and Kay Keane. And I'm delighted to say congratulations to you, Kay, because Urban Village Medical Practice recently got outstanding for a CQC visit. So congratulations.
Thank you. And I have to say, nobody is more surprised than us. We went into it knowing that 10 years ago, we were an outstanding practice. And at that point, I think we were very different. So to people who've not heard me talk about the practice before, and I think they can listen to it on some of your previous podcasts where some of the clinicians spoke to you, we run the homeless service for the city centre. So 10 years ago, that was absolutely unique, something that no one had seen before. But lots has happened in that time. You know, lots of practices are doing other innovative things. So we kind of expected to get good, and we would have been really happy with good. So to get outstanding, you know, no one was more surprised than us.
And it's one of those things people really think, how do I get outstanding on a CQC visit? And so when we heard, that you'd achieved that, so we're really keen to have you on so we could explore that a bit. Would you say that's fair, Claire? I mean, you must get people contacting Practice Index saying, look, what do we need to do for our CQC visit? And how can we get that step from good to outstanding? Because it's not a common designation that they give, is it?
No, 100%. Interestingly, actually, I was talking to a practice manager last week, and he said that they had also just achieved outstanding. So to have two in kind of the sphere I've been speaking to in a week is quite extraordinary. But what he was saying is that they'd used Practice Index policies and CQC Manager and their library pages to really get everything kind of up to date, and that their inspector had really loved it, which is great for us to hear. But I guess the question is really for Kay, versus an inspection on the older framework, how do you think that things have changed?
Totally different experience. From start to finish, totally different. Just to go back to the numbers to put into perspective for other practice managers, only 4.8% of practices have got outstanding in the new system. And I think that really, for me, it feels amazing. And I feel really honoured to be here. But I don't want to say it's unachievable, but it is going to be a small proportion of practices that probably do something different, like the homeless service, that might get that. So I think to set your expectations at the beginning as well. Good is good. Good is hard to achieve, and it's a massive sort of sphere of score. So I don't want anyone to think, oh, it's all right for her, she's got outstanding. Everybody puts hard work in to get good as well. So as for the differences, I thought it might be useful if I kind of went from the beginning of sort of when we got the call. I still feel a little bit like I've got PTSD about it, because they messaged us. Well, they sent an email through and rang us at 5:00 on a Friday. I don't know if you remember that both of you have worked in and around practices for a long time. 5:00 on a Friday, you just had a really rubbish week, whatever's happened. You're just desperate for 6:30, for the phones to stop, to get out the door, probably in any industry actually. But to get that notification at 5:00, 5:30, and that, chain of events after that, which was lots of swearing, if I'm completely honest. Have we got to give up our weekend? Should we all come into work tomorrow? What have you got planned for Sunday? It was definitely all systems go at that point. And actually what we decided to do, the partners and I, was to kind of all use that first weekend to just read and plan independently and think about what each of us needed to do. And then plan that Monday we'd really try and start our proper plan and bring the team together. So we tried to not let the rest of the team know over that weekend and just really focus on us and what we felt we needed and make that initial plan.
How much did you do before, Kate? Were you like in a place of, look, we know this call's coming at some point. Like I say, it's not great. It comes at 5:00 on a Friday, but did you have like, we've got the CQC stuff ready to go for the point at which it comes? Or was it like, right, we better get started?
We're probably somewhere in the middle. So we'd used some of Practice Index's products. We'd got some organisation, but we were moving from, for example, our HR files, we were moving from paper to Practice Index electronic system. And we'd made some assumptions about what we'd got on paper. So we'd started afresh with Practice Index. And then when we went back to look at some of the things we thought we'd got on paper, they weren't perhaps all in the right order or in the right place. We certainly hadn't used something that we've now started using, which is the Compliance Manager. In fact, I had a demo of that the week after CQC just to make sure I knew what to do next time, because it kind of prepares you that you're on the radar, they're going to come back. So we definitely weren't in a great position. I think we were in a good position. We knew that there were CQC searches and we were looking at them. So if you're not aware of those CQC searches, you can download them. If you use Ardens, they're on the Ardens Manager, and run those regularly and just know that data and get the people that are going to do the CQC calls to know that data. So for us, it was our pharmacy team, because lots of them are pharmaceutical medicines kind of searches. It was our pharmacy tech that ran those searches and our digital team. But actually, the partners didn't necessarily have eyes on all the names all the time. So when they had a call, so I don't know if people are aware, you have to put 2 people forward to do a call with a clinical expert. So that's a remote telephone call. In our case, it was a GP that was a lot of miles away, didn't know anything about Manchester, shouldn't matter, knew how to navigate our clinical system. And the fact that we kind of logged in one morning and he was on our system looking at our stuff was quite anxiety inducing. Where's he been? What's he doing? Why is he doing it? And then I think if the GPs were on the call, they would tell you that that was quite a difficult phone call for them, because it's interrogating the information about their patients and the patients that they knew from seeing them rather than statistic about them. If you've not had that before, if there was any way you could practice, that would be great, I think.
So what did they do, Kate? They went into like specific individual patient notes and discussed what was happening with that patient. Is that what they did?
Yeah. And one example that the GPs, when they kind of came out and said, that was really hard, he kind of had me going down a list of all our, asthma patients. And he said, stop. And when we stopped on that particular patient, he then said, open up that patient record, tell me about that patient and describe the care you're giving them.
And that was their patient, or like, it might not have been the patient of the GP who was on the call.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It might have been an asthma patient that is seen by our nurse, twice a year, has their regular checks, but never gets to see a GP. So then wanted to describe, the care, what we do for those patients. It was definitely kind of on your toes. They focus with us on safeguarding quite a lot. We think we're really good at that, but I think across the NHS, coding of patients and family members is sometimes complicated and difficult. So I think there was quite a lot of conversation around that. So it's definitely a good idea to get on that call somebody with great experience of safeguarding and your patients that are on that safeguarding register.
Claire, have you come across other places that have had that kind of experience, and any thoughts about how people can prepare for that if it's not something they've experienced before?
My experience of CQC in the same sort of way is that experience of it feels very, very pressured because you're so concerned that you're going to say the wrong thing. Even if you're doing the right things, just being under pressure is really quite challenging in itself. I think you're so aware of the impact that potentially saying the wrong thing might have on your practice. So it's a huge thing. So I completely understand where Kay's GPs are coming from with that. I think what Kay's just said there actually is a really important point, that actually we know that CQC at some point will be coming. We tend to sort of shelve that thought until you get the phone call. And then at the point where you get the phone call, you think, right, as much as you're kind of on top of things, if that makes sense, and you think, right, okay, we're good to go. But, there are CQC mock inspections. That's something we offer as part of the service at PI, that you can get somebody to come in and talk to you about that kind of thing. So they can take you through what it might look like on the day and give you a really good set of guidance in terms of this is where you might want to think about, focusing. These are the things that we picked up that you might want to think about. But just as teams, as Kay said, having that conversation. If I was a GP, what I've learned from inspection is that what they're trying to do is what we call triangulate. So they're wanting to take the data and then look at what else can I see that backs up what the data tells me. And that's exactly what Kay's talking about in that conversation, that actually we've got the data here in front of us. What can you as a clinician tell me about what's happening in the care in your practice? Do you understand what that looks like and what that feels like for the patient? So that's a hugely important point. The data says this, but what does that look like in practice? Do you know what's going on? Do you know how you're dealing with your patients? And it all comes back, I think, to that kind of well-led, which is such a big part, I think, of CQC, really. Knowing where you are, being able to absolutely understand the challenges that you face, because, make no mistake about it, general practice is under, a lot of pressure, and we've talked about that a lot, but it's about understanding actually where we are, and then what they want confidence in really is your ability to identify where you need to be and to take those steps. None of us are going to be perfect, but outstanding is a fantastic achievement. As Kay said, it's a tiny percentage of practice that will be outstanding. But actually, that massive part of that is that ability to say, actually, where are we? What are we doing? And we're doing well? How does that match the needs of our patients? And that's what CQC, I think, are focusing on. So, Kay, from your experience, do you think the clinical focus was different to the focus on the back of office things? Does that feel very different to you?
Well, if I was speaking some of the words that our staff members said, they were overwhelmed with the questionnaire that was sent out to them. And that questionnaire went to all staff. So you get asked for lots of documentation as practice manager. You get asked for lots and lots of documents. And one of those things that you get asked for is a list of staff names, email addresses, and they get emailed a questionnaire. I didn't get one for myself. The practice manager gets different questions, but the staff all got, GPs, nurses, admin and clerical staff, everybody got this questionnaire. And staff were coming in and saying, have you seen these questions? I don't even know where to start. When have I got time to fill this in? And that's one of the things as the IGPM, we've kind of gone back to CQC and said, please don't underestimate how time consuming and stressful this is on practice teams.
What type of things were they asking, Kay?
Do you know what to do in a particular situation? What happens in your practice with this? Things about duty of candour, what happens in an emergency? Do you know where to go to? All of that kind of stuff. Even down to what are the infection control policies? Do you know how to get information on support for yourself? Do you see your line manager often? Is the appraisals happening in your practice? It is so much detail, Ben. Our staff, as staff members across primary care, are so committed to us, and they all felt a real responsibility to get that right. So we had staff members coming in and saying, you know what, I've spent all my weekend filling this in. And they were kind of happy to do it, but also it was a lot because they were also witnessing, I'll be completely honest, we were running around like headless chickens some days. And I think anyone who's been through CQC recently will say just the fact that they're coming stops normal happening. As much as they want you to carry on doing the day job, we actually got locums in most days. We freed up our partners. And, I didn't do a lot other than CQC, as did my managers in services. So it was all hands on deck for 2 weeks. So it was disruptive for the team. As much as we tried to, appease it and say, you're doing a great job and thanks, and giving them time to fill the questionnaire in during the week, it was a lot. It was time consuming. I think it did take a toll on the team because they wanted the best.
You said you got the call on the Friday and you came in on the Monday. Had you decided at that point, look, we're going for outstanding? Or was it never something you were actually trying for?
Never. Our expectation was we would be good. And we knew good was this big sort of trajectory, this great big middle ground that actually that's what we were striving for. We didn't want anything other than good, because good now was actually the outstanding of 10 years ago.
Was there anything else different about the preparation, with the new regime other than what you've mentioned?
I spent a lot of time pulling data and information together. I spent a lot of time making a sort of document for them, which actually, with hindsight, I probably could have done months and months ago, that described our practice, why we're different, what we're like, because they give you quite tight timescales on the day that they come. They have a hard job. the inspectors have a really tough gig. So we had 3 with us. Just for kind of background, our practice list size is about 13,500. And then we have this homeless service that's a little bit different. We have a clinical van that they wanted to look at as well. But there was 3 inspectors plus the remote clinical team. And they said, you can do a presentation, but actually you don't need to. So we really thought about whether to do that. And it was a decision that the partners took to say, let's make it as kind of easy as possible on that morning. Let's not stand up and talk at them for half an hour. Let's make them feel comfortable. Let's get some good coffee. Let's sit with them and talk to them. And that's what we decided to do. And we wanted to make it as sort of stress-free as possible. We made sure they'd got a good parking space. We made sure they'd got good food, good coffee, lots of biscuits, all of that stuff to make their day as good as possible. So we asked them before the day what they wanted and what would make it easy for them. And I think that went down really well, that we cared about them and their day, even if actually that was a little bit of us wanting to give them a great impression of us as well. Our approach is often a little bit more conversational than presentational.
I think that's important, though. Be interested what you think, Claire, but sometimes it feels, I've been with practices when they have CQC inspections and they almost treat the inspectors a bit like the enemy. It does become a little bit them and us, especially if, some of the questioning beforehand felt a little bit intrusive. So I do think it's important the way that the inspectors are actually treated on the day and made to feel welcome as opposed to, tolerated. What do you think, Claire?
It's interesting, I was delivering a session about this yesterday and talking about, conflict. Not that obviously you'd hope your inspection was full of conflict, but about conflict and how we manage our expectations and how we manage relationships and building that rapport. And actually, that's a really important thing. You can't influence somebody else's behaviour in that way, but you can influence your own. And I think Kay's absolutely right in that sense, that actually they are doing a really difficult job. If you think about what you know about your practice, and how long it's taken you to get that basic level of just gut feeling about how things are going and you've got all the data, but actually that kind of, yes, okay, we're doing okay here. This looks good to us. It feels good. We think we're doing a good job with our patients. And when you get a team of inspectors in, they don't know the practice really. They don't know you. So they've got all of that information that you've just sort of absorbed to take on board. And if you make it adversarial, ultimately, we should all, as, managers, as partners in practices, we should all want to do a great job. I genuinely believe that most people go to work in the morning thinking that they're going to do a great job and want to do a great job. We all, kind of common theme across the NHS, want to look after our patients to the best of our ability. And I think what we need to think is if CQC pick up things that maybe we could do a little bit better, then actually that's a good thing because it's maybe pointing out to us something that we hadn't seen. And sometimes when you're looking at anything like that, you can't see the wood for the trees. And I do really think, like I say, that conversational approach of actually we want it to be the best it can be, not because we want the badge, but because we want to do the best job for our patients. It's what we turn up for. I actually think it's a sound approach. And as I say, I think you're absolutely right that if you start out with best foot forward, that makes a massive difference to how things go on the day. It is challenging and they will come across practices that are really, struggling and that can't feel very easy for them having to deliver a message that perhaps wasn't necessarily understood by the practice themselves. There'll be lots of practices who go into an inspection thinking, yeah, great, everything's great. And then actually by the end of the inspection, they think, oh, maybe it's not so amazing. And those inspectors ultimately are the ones that are having to deliver that message. And that must feel quite tricky on a daily basis.
I know responsive is something that they look for, but the clinician had mentioned something on the call to the partners that he'd expected to see and didn't see. And we fixed it before the actual physical inspection happened. And we were able to prove that when our inspector came on site so that we could show that, yeah, hands up, we hadn't done that, but here it is. Because you're still in the inspection phase during that time. So I think that's good as well to just kind of hold your hands up. If you realise that there isn't something that you're doing quite so well, but you've got a plan, write a risk assessment about it, say, I know this is missing, but this is our plan for getting that right. I think that shows a very sort of mature leadership team as well. And I say all of that on the back of And I don't know how happy my partners will be for me to say this out loud, but on the Friday before they came, I handed my notice in because I was just like thinking, oh my God, I don't know how we're going to get through next week. We'd had a really tough meeting in the morning about what we still needed to do. I'd said to one of the senior partners, Jen, will you just stay back a minute? And I said, Jen, if this goes wrong, I'm going to take the blame for this. It's my leadership. I'm holding my hands up now. You have my resignation. And she basically said, in a beautiful, lovely way, shut up, Kay, go and get some fresh air and you'll be right. She was absolutely correct. I got outside the practice, I walked round, I got myself a proper coffee, I came back and I felt better. But we all take on that stress differently. And I didn't think I'd be the person that would say, I'm giving up. But I did that morning. It was really, really hard. So for all of you that have done this or are going to do this, do everything you can to look after yourself. Use all the resources we've got out there. So there are wonderful, wonderful practice managers and organisations that freely share their skills, their data, their tools. Let's support each other and do that. You've only got to go on the forums on Practice Index or on the IGPM chats, and people are so generous and will give that information away. And we want every patient to have a great experience at their GP practice. So my real learning is have a bit of confidence in yourself as well. And we all know our practices so well. And it is, as Claire says, it's about making sure the inspector knows that.
A lot does fall to the practice manager, though, doesn't it? For these, because you've got the GP, obviously the partners are feeling the pressure, but a lot of what actually needs doing sort of comes through the practice manager themselves. So it's like big pressure, isn't it? Not just on the day, but like you say, from the moment you get the call right through to when it finishes.
And again, you're just trying to give the best. You're trying to show the best. You're trying to explain to somebody who is only going to come to you for, 8 hours? The stuff that you see every day that goes on. You're trying to showcase, but also not forget the basics that you have to get right, which probably brings me on to the report. So we got our report and it took a while.
Had they fed back to you at the end of the day?
Yeah, very vague stuff, like kind of, there's nothing you need to be concerned about. So we kind of knew we weren't being shut down. Always good. But our expectations were 6 to 8 weeks, and it was probably more like 12 weeks. So what we decided to do when we knew it was going to be 6 to 8 weeks was do some work with our staff members after the visit. So I did a really, really quick Teams questionnaire to everybody that had helped and asked them, how was it for you? What could we have done better? What did you need that you didn't have? And we actually fed that information back to the inspector, because some of it I thought was key for them to understand about the pressure that the staff felt.
Was that the main feedback, the pressure of the experience? Was that the main thing that came back?
Yeah. You know, that's a reflection on the management team. It was kind of, we felt that there was a lot of work going on that we didn't quite understand, and that as well as doing our day jobs, we had to fill in a 20-page questionnaire. We fed that back quite openly to the inspector. And I think we have to be empowered enough to say things to the inspection team as well that they can learn from. So one of the other things that I fed back before they actually came was they want feedback from patients. So I'm a great advocate for our patients. I want our patients to be involved in their care. But one of the things that they gave us was a website that we had to send out to our patients that had been seen within the last X amount of time, and for patients to give their feedback. But there wasn't a way for patients to talk to anyone or to give that feedback in writing. So I went back to the inspector and said, what can we do? And she said, well, I don't know. No one's asked me that before. So we came up with a solution that would work for us and our population, which was we would ask people to write it down in the waiting room, or we'd ask, particularly for our homeless service, some of our workers to write stuff down for patients who wanted to feed back. So I'd kind of set myself up to be a little bit sort of probing with the questions that I was asking the inspector. And I did it all in a really sort of respectful way. I'm sure she knew I was doing it because I just wanted the best. When our report came through after about 12 weeks, it said we were good. And we were ecstatic that it was good. You know, we read the top line, good, that's all we wanted, all we were asking for. And then we started reading the details and reading it like we were a patient. And there were some elements within it that just felt a little bit uncomfortable. And there were some elements in it where I thought she or the team had actually not quite understood what we'd done and what some of the background was. So you have an opportunity to appeal that decision. And, we sat round the table thinking, so we just take good. There were some bits that really didn't annoy me, but maybe just grated on me. And one of them was, we have what we call our sluice room. And in the sluice room, we have urine samples, all that kind of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. It is, in all intents and purposes, like the sort of back kitchen of a restaurant. We know it's clean, but it's a sluice room. It's not clinically clean. And she'd written in the report that we had a dirty room. And I just felt if patients read that and the word dirty, they'd think we were filthy. And that was one of the words I felt uncomfortable with. She also had mentioned that our nurse meetings weren't minuted. We have two different nurse meetings. We have a formal one that is minuted, and then we do something called restorative supervision, which we do because our nurse teams deal with the biggest health inequalities, and we want to give them space to have a kind of off-the-record conversation and to support each other, and that isn't minuted. But it does have the ability to raise concerns to the partnership. So she'd got that a little bit mixed up. So we thought those two things alone, we felt we had to appeal. And we didn't think that that would get us outstanding at all. We didn't think that would change the rating. But we just went through it kind of line by line. And I took quite a lot of time to do that and just suggested in areas if they'd mentioned something that shouldn't that also be mentioned in a different section. So I took quite an analytical view of it and we sent it back and we waited probably 4 weeks. We didn't hear anything. So we were all thinking, oh God, we should have gone for the good. And then within that 4 weeks, they then came back and said they've got an IT problem. And I don't know if listeners are aware, but I believe what happens now is all of the data goes into some kind of AI tool and it kind of spews out the report. So something had gone wrong with that and the report wasn't right. So we've ended up waiting probably in total sort of 4 or 5 months for our report. And when we got the outstanding and we just kind of, with those comments that we've made, just moved into outstanding, it was unbelievable. We just couldn't imagine that that appeal had moved us up a grade. So my advice to practices is it isn't one way. It should be a two-way process. And that conversation, I think, was important, both to us as a practice and to the inspector. They want you to do well. And we got that feeling from our inspector. She wanted our staff and our patients to be represented in the best way.
I think the way you do it, though, is important, isn't it? I mean, I'm really interested in what Claire thinks on this because I've known people where it's often when it's like not a great outcome from an inspection and it becomes a bit not factual in terms of what's sent back, but emotional rather than being factually, these are the things that you've said and these things aren't true and this is why. So I don't know what you wrote back, but I assume, like you did mention it was analytical and I assume it was very, you've said this, but just to be clarified, this is this and this is what happens. And I suspect having that approach is really, really important because if it comes across as an emotional response, I don't think you get that. I don't know what the number of ratings that are changed are, but I suspect it's low. And I suspect that might be why. What do you think, Claire?
I think you're absolutely right. I think when we're looking at where does CQC start with this is searches and reports, data. What policies have you got? Can you send me this? Looking at those staff feedback forms. How many of your staff said that they knew where this was? How many of your staff said that they felt comfortable to report a concern? Those kinds of things. You know, something Kay said really sort of resonated with me in terms of that maturity of feedback. And I think this is part of that. And I think, as I said to you, earlier on today, that well-led piece is so important in every aspect of it, that actually being able to say, okay, we've read the report. We're not going to react in an emotional way. We want it to be a fair representation of where we're at. So as Kay said, the word dirty does have connotations, and actually it's not necessarily that it is dirty, but what it is a room that is used for a specific purpose, and only for that specific purpose. It's not a clinical treatment room in the way that you would expect. So it's about those nuances of actually, you said this, but that. And, going back to that kind of responsive, again, back to well-led, we've got 2 nursing teams who have these concerns and we want them to be able to share it in a safe space. We want to make sure that we're picking up on their emotional needs. It helps prevent that workforce burnout. All of that is really, really important. And I think, it's those distinctions of actually, factually, this is what is happening. And I think that calmness probably speaks volumes for the inspectors.
So I'm sure there's people listening to this who are wishing they are where you are, Kay, which is on the other end of this with a really good outcome. So just final thoughts in terms of advice you'd have for people who have this coming or are about to go in. What would you say to them?
Practice managers are brilliant and they are generous, and there are lots of resources and people out there that are happy and willing to help. Be that organisations like Practice Index or the IGPM or your local practice management networks. Those of us that have got experience of going through it, I'm sure want everyone else to have that learning that we've got. So speak up, ask if there's something that you're not sure about, use those networks, put a question on the Practice Index forum. You'll be amazed at the amount of responses you get. The IGPM have got a CQC chat. We've also got a HR chat where people are just so generous with their time. So I would use your networks to their best advantage and just always have it in your mind. Do a little bit. We're now using that compliance tool for Practice Index on Practice Index because we know they're going to come again and we want to be in a better position. So for the practice that Claire mentioned before that is using that, theirs must have been, I'm not going to say a breeze because that wouldn't be fair of me, but it would have been easier that they could have just said to the inspector, fill your boots, go and have a look on Practice Index, it's all there. So I hope that by the next time we're in that position.
Thanks. And Claire, just to finish off, just remind us then what the resources are that are available on Practice Index for practices preparing for an inspection.
We've got absolutely loads. So we have, obviously, as always, our many, many policies, and that's great support. But the compliance from CQC manager point of view, you can link all of the activity that you do in the hub, and that activity then you can map back to your outcomes in terms of CQC. So you can really see, how are we doing? What evidence have we got? And that is exactly what the practice manager said, is that actually we just let the inspector have at it. And there you go. You can see it's all linked, click through. And we've got CQC handbook, which it gives a blow-by-blow account really of all the things that you need to think about, which is really great backup. We've got specific CQC resources. So we do spend a lot of time and effort building things to try and support practices. I think because we generally take the view that for us, we can do it well and do it once and support a lot of practice managers with that versus each and every individual practice manager having to go out and unpick the same stuff themselves. So we try really hard to make sure that we've got resources in place that scaffold.
Brilliant. Well, thanks both. Congratulations again, Kay. It really is a fantastic achievement. And for those of you who are listening who want to find out more about case practice, we did do an episode with Kay and some of her partners, and we'll link that up in the show notes so you can find out more about the services that practice offers for those of you who are interested. Thanks both. Until next time.
Thank you.
In this episode, we explored what effective preparation for a CQC inspection really looks like. As Kay mentioned, you never quite know when that call will come. So being prepared in advance can really help take the stress out of the process. We also discussed CQC Manager, part of the compliance package in the Practice Index Hub. It's the perfect place to store all your evidence and documents in one secure location, ready for your inspector to review either on the day or beforehand. Simply build your evidence against the quality statements to ensure compliance. To see CQC Manager in action, book a demo at practiceindex.co.uk.
The General Practice Podcast from Ockham Healthcare, supporting innovation in general practice.